Well, welcome to this week's devotionals. We're going to be continuing through Deuteronomy, getting close to the end, but another week yet to go. Just mostly going chapter by chapter this week. Lots of different little laws at times, so I'm not going to touch on every one. If there's questions, send them to me, faithfulquestions@gmail.com, or send them to me direct, whichever is easiest for you. Chapter 22 of Deuteronomy, Moses is giving more laws for the people for when they enter the promised land, how their society should function. And again, these laws are about God revealing his character. So there's lots of things that relate to equity and justice and loyalty and not mistreating others. And this is in a context that's very different than our own. And so some of these laws seem barbaric in ways, but again, when we understand the culture of the time, these were advancements and these were sowing seeds that we have reaped the benefit of today. Why we see viewing people as property as a bad thing actually has a lot of roots in these Old Testament laws. And part of this was so that God's people, these 12 tribes, would be distinct from how the nations around them operated. The nations around them very much would view certain people as property, or particularly women or children. And so, again, we need to understand things in historical context. It is not fair to take these laws, put them into our modern context, and in a sense, judge them. We need to be looking at the context and then look at the fruit of what they would produce. People were to be different. Verse 8 in this chapter about building a parapet, basically a railing around your rooftop. This has been for a number of years kind of my go-to verse for trying to explain how to understand, read, and apply. Probably a different order. Read it first, then look to understand it, then apply it. These Old Testament laws. Again, I live in a house with a peaked roof. Nobody should be on my roof. This is not where I entertain guests. In ancient world, going into the promised land, houses, often one, maybe two rooms. Animals would often be kept inside at times for security. And the roof, it was a flat roof. It was a place of entertaining. Doesn't smell as bad. Don't have the animals going around. And so this regulation is build a railing around your rooftop. That way, your guest doesn't accidentally fall off and harm themselves. I mean, there's a principle here of caring for, loving others. And so I don't build a railing around my roof because if there's someone up there, they're probably not my neighbor, or they know to be safe. I'm not entertaining people there, but I have a railing around my deck. If people come over that they have a food allergy, we won't have that accessible or available or have used that in any of the food, depending on, again, the severity of the allergy. And, it's how do we care for those who are guests in our home? How do we show good hospitality? How do we show love of neighbor? This is what this regulation is kind of the seeds underneath it. And this is a particular application of those principles. We're going to apply these principles in different ways, but it all roots down to love of neighbor. And so we need to see the Old Testament law as wisdom, as a guidance, not as literal rules to obey, whether today or even then. If a person didn't have a flat roof in that, they wouldn't have built a railing around their rooftop. This isn't building code. This is how do I love well? And what are some examples that make sense in that context? How do we make sense of it in our context? Also, we see laws related to the protection for women so that they cannot be or should not be used or abused. They should not be treated as property. They can't be just simply accused and then, hey, It's all your fault because they were in the weaker position socially, that they would not have had, uh, wouldn't have been as educated, wouldn't have been necessarily as able to defend themselves from a legal standpoint. Um, it would have been harder because of the culture to find and receive justice. And so here we have regulation built in to help protect and mediate that. Again, it's the same kind of thing of what would that look like today? Um, just because someone is in a position of influence doesn't mean they should automatically be believed. As well as just because someone is in a weaker position, we can go into the other ditch. However, we need to recognize that power imbalance and give some measure of maybe stronger listening or questioning, as the case may be. This is about helping us to be wise, because we are called as followers of Jesus to live distinctively from the culture around us. That's not being different for the sake of being different. It is, what are the values and principles of God's kingdom based on God's character, based on how he has revealed himself most clearly in Jesus, and how do we live these out? And that by itself, if we are loving God and loving our neighbor as Jesus is leading us, we will live differently than our neighbors. We will live differently than our community. Maybe not in every way. Sometimes we have really great neighbors. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have neighbors who maybe are a little bit more generous than we are. But there's other areas where we are displaying the love of Jesus in a way that is distinct. And that's part of what we're called to do. As you seek to love God and love your neighbor as yourself today, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today would you know his peace. God bless.